Hey, what's good, my fellow masters? Well, it has been around a week since the release of Lostbelt 6 Avalon LaFay, and I hope you're enjoying the adventure as much as I am. I'm taking my time going through the story though, so perhaps many watching have already completed Act 1. Aside from that, no doubt many of you rolled on the banner featuring Morgan, Tamlin, Gawain, and Tamlin Tristan like I did, and hopefully you were able to summon your desired servant. But then comes the part to ascend them and raise their skills, which brings us to the topic of this video. The LB6 servants will, in particular, need two sorta new Ascension materials that, for NA, were originally introduced into the game back in May of 2022, part of that huge and early servant coin update. The Bronze tier materials, Small Bell of Absolution, and the Silver tier Scales of Fantasy. So these have been around for just over a year, but have only really been obtainable through events and maybe the monthly exchange tickets. Even for those that have been diligently saving Bells of Absolution and Scales of Fantasy since May of last year, you probably need more. And now with the release of Lostbelt 6, we finally have a permanent place from which they can be farmed. Well, once the LB6 free quests are unlocked, that is. And that will be once all of the Avalon LaFay main story quests are completed. At any rate, let's take a look at the servants that need these two materials, and then the best place to farm for them. Eventually. Starting with the Small Bell of Absolution, among the related Lostbelt 6 servants, Tamlin Gawain needs 180 in total to max out all of her skills. Tamlin Lancelot requires a whopping 216 in total for her skills, plus 5 for her simple Spiritron Dress second ascension. 216 Small Bells of Absolution are needed for all 3 of Castoria's appends. And our man Oberon needs 45 total for his skills. Regarding the upcoming new servants we will be getting for the rest of 2023, if you're planning to max out all of Summer Charlotte Corday's appends, then she requires quite a bit, at 180 total. Avenger Kama, a fairly anticipated servant in her own right, needs 45 total for all of her appends. Mysterious Ranmaru X also needs them for her appends, the total amount being 36. Moving on to the Scales of Fantasy, Tamlin Gawain needs these as well, but this time for her appends, being 60 in total. Tamlin Tristan requires 60 Scales of Fantasy for all of her skills. Tamlin Lancelot needs 72 total for her appends, plus 5 for her simple Spiritron Dress first ascension. The adorable Habtrot needs 10 Scales of Fantasy for her ascensions, and then 60 more to max her skills. 72 in total are required to raise all of Queen Morgan's skills. And then Oberon needs Scales of Fantasy for both ascension and skills, 10 and 45 respectively. Just one new 2023 servant that is still yet to come needs this material. Summer Archer Anastasia requires 60 in total for her 3 appends. Fortunately for us, there are a fair amount of Bells of Absolution and Scales of Fantasy that can be gained from just playing through the story of Avalon LaFay. This at least gives us something while we wait for access to the LB6 free quest to properly farm for them. Completing Act 1 of Avalon LaFay should have netted 19 bells and 20 scales from drop rewards and first clears of the story section, along with these other Ascension items. When we're able to play through Act 2 in about a week, 35 bells of Absolution and 42 Scales of Fantasy will be obtained from drop rewards and clearing sections. Some sources indicate 49 scales, but I was only able to verify 42 from the info on the FGO fandom wiki. Plus, there are also these other material rewards as well. Now, assuming we are still following how things went on JP for Lostbelt 6, then there will be an as yet unannounced third or concluding act for Avalon LaFay. And in it, you can get an additional 16 Small Bells of Absolution and 17 Scales of Fantasy, along with a few other materials for good measure. Thus, after completing all of the Avalon Lostbelt, the total count for Small Bells of Absolution should be 70, and for Scales of Fantasy, a tally of 79. A good amount of each in general, but as some of the LB6 servants need quantities in the triple digits, there is bound to be a deficit for someone. When you finish up the main quest of LB6 Avalon Lefay and all of its free quests become accessible, here are the two that have been noted to provide the best drop rates for either the bells or scales. The Mist Coast free quest will be the place to farm for small bells of absolution. It has a drop rate of 72.6% or an AP drop ratio of 28.9. This free quest is a mixed node with Berserker enemies in waves 1 and 2, and then a couple of Avenger enemies for wave 3, something not seen too often. And the free quest to focus on for these Scales of Fantasy will be Londinium, consisting of mostly Saber enemies, but with a caster mixed in on waves 2 and 3. The drop rate here was found to be 45.3%, or a ratio of 46.4 AP per drop for the Scales. If you're not too keen on farming regular free quests to gather up the amount of materials needed for a particular servant, then here is a look at the upcoming events that have some quantity of either Small Bells of Absolution or Scales of Fantasy. The Chaldea Summer Adventure event, expected August or September perhaps, will have up to 30 Small Bells and 5 Scales. Then around October, 5 of each can be obtained from the Halloween 2023 event. The Gouda Gouda Close Call event in November will have up to 30 Small Bells of Absolution. And last for the year, both of these materials will be among the drop items for the repeatable final raid boss of the Tunguska Sanctuary event in December. Well, I hope this info can be helpful. I was in the midst of raising the skills for my Barghest, and I realized I needed to conserve small bells for Oberon, which then reminded me I didn't yet do one of these Ascension Material videos for LB6. So here we are. For me, I will definitely have to farm the free quest for more small bells and these Scales of Fantasy. Unfortunately, maxing out my Barghest, Bavan, and Melusine, hopefully, will have to wait for a bit. Please hit that like button if this helped in some way, or if you just enjoyed listening to me talk about FGO in general. Oh, and we're not too far from hitting 15k subs, so if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to support the channel. Many thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers!